And we're back. Max, let's get a little bit of preview for this fight night this weekend. Walk us through your combat corner, buddy.
Yeah, this fight night was the last one of 2020, the last UFC event. It When I was looking at it sometime around December 1st, this card actually looked better than the pay-per-view that was slotted for December 12th. Now the pay-per-view grew in strength and this card has somewhat weakened, most notably through the loss of the headliner of Leon Edwards, Khamzat Chimaev, but it's still a really strong card. I'm going to be breaking down every fight on the main card just because they're all really interesting, compelling fights. So, with no further ado, I'll start with the main event, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Geoff Hands of Steel Neal. Now, if there's any silver lining or saving grace of the main event being scrapped, it's that this is the replacement fight we get because it's an awesome one that totally deserves 5 rounds. Geoff Neal is a Contender Series alum and one of the success stories. We'll be talking about the Contender Series, I think, a lot throughout the next 6 months, year, long on. So it's important to note who the success stories are, where the Contender Series has worked out, and where it hasn't. Geoff Neal is the best you can hope for from the Contender Series. Came in on a stoppage win. I believe he had wins over Frank Camacho, Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, and Mike Perry. Every one of those wins, except Bilal Muhammad, has been stoppage. 2 of them head kicks. It was ground and pound over Nico Price. It's not a coincidence that Bilal Muhammad is the most impressive name on that list, while also being the only one where there isn't a finish. But this guy's for real. He's absolutely deserves to be in the top 15, and now he gets his test in Stephen Thompson. Wonderboy is one of those guys who's just been there and done that and somehow managed to stay at the top of the division. He spent 15 minutes in the cage with Tyron Woodley, and he won most of those minutes, but lost both, or had a split draw and a loss. Just a couple bursts of Woodley's athleticism and power swung the fight in Woodley's favor. But since then, he's been in there with a murderer's row of Darren Till, Jorge Masvidal, Anthony Pettis, which that was a weird fight, and most recently Vicente Luque, who came looking to throw hands violently, and Wonderboy had to suffer a little, but ultimately put on a striking clinic, getting the better of Luque. So that brings me to the matchup, which is really interesting because they're both technical fighters. You don't get the 2 head kick knockouts that Geoff Neal has without knowing how to time, set up your head kick, be in proper stance, move, pressure correctly, all the little stuff. He's very aware. He's not just swinging. And it's going to be interesting how that style works against a technique virtuoso in Wonderboy. Wonderboy's karate stance, his ability to move backwards in and out, is going to make the range, I think, a real question for Neal. He likes to lead with his hands, get your attention on his power, just keep pressuring and find a shot, and that's worked against Wonderboy in the past. Woodley, that's how he won the fight. Darren Till, the biggest moment of that fight was Till knocking down Wonderboy. Luque even was able to back Wonderboy up and hurt him, and I think Geoff Neal might have more power in his hands than Luque. So my first impulse is to say Wonderboy's side kicks, his ability to move, are gonna just present problems for the more traditional orthodox fighter in Geoff Neal, and that's going to be to Wonderboy's advantage. But I didn't mention there his loss to Pettis. Like, Wonderboy, he can look great 95% of the time, but this is mixed martial arts. That 5% can cost you the fight. So I think when you have fighters who are just both very similar, then age is usually the deciding factor. And that's kind of what I see here. 2 technical guys. You give Wonderboy the edge with his like ability to manage distance, use side kicks, tap the leg and confuse, his switch stance, his jab. But I think over 5 rounds, Geoff Neal probably finds 1 or 2 shots and finishes Wonderboy. But I almost don't want that to happen, because the state of the welterweight division right now is Kamaru Usman is just so dominant that you're looking, any fight that's top 10, top 15, you're kind of asking, okay, but could they beat Usman? What challenges do they present to Usman? And like I said, Neal is very traditional. If Jorge Masvidal wasn't, well, Jorge Masvidal showed up on a week's notice, so I hope they run that fight back. But Neal would have a puncher's chance against Usman, whereas I think Wonderboy's footwork, his switch stance, his ability to throw front kicks, which are really useful against, or not front kicks, side kicks, excuse me, are really useful against pressure fighters. And that's what Usman does. He just walks forward. So I'd love to see Wonderboy pull this out, prove me wrong, and be perfect 100% of the time. Nico Price hurt Geoff Neal, so it's not, there are holes in his striking. And I said that if Wonderboy has like a 5% laxness, he's been in trouble, but that's just as true for Geoff Neal. What I'm getting at is this is an awesome fight where you really don't know who can take it. Either man has a path to victory, and I think there's real title implications for the winner. I don't think whoever wins this is next in line, but I think they'll be 1 fight away. It's an awesome main event. I'm super excited for it. Co-main event, Jose Aldo, Marlon Chito Vera. This is also a very interesting fight with similar title implications of putting the winner 1 or 2 wins away. So I'll start with Marlon Vera. He had a nice finishing streak with a decent activity rate that got him near the top of the division, and this year set him up for a fight with Song Yadong, who I believe had just become ranked or was similarly cracking the top 15. It was a really close competitive fight. I had Song Yadong winning. I thought he just landed a little more to the body, he did land more to the head. I thought he was landing the harder strikes. The significant stat rate in the UFC is a problem because they seem to count every leg kick as a significant strike. So the significant strikes looked close, but not all significant strikes are equally significant, and I thought Song Yadong's were more. Marlon had some grappling control, but no real dominance. I could give a 10-minute essay on why I think Song Yadong won the fight, but regardless, it was certainly close. But Marlon Vera almost got the better of it despite being handed the loss, because he got his next matchmaking opportunity in Sean O'Malley. That was another strange fight where O'Malley's leg got injured for the second time in his career in the cage, and he couldn't move on it properly. He couldn't throw properly. He fell to the ground. Marlon got on top of him, and he landed like 3, 4, 5 ground strikes, and Herb Dean stopped it. I'm not sure how I feel about the stoppage. I think O'Malley was intelligently defending himself. If it was in any other situation, I would think it was a 100% bad stoppage, because at no point did you see O'Malley stop defending himself. It was just like Vera's looking for a strike. He moves, he feints, he lands one, moves, feints, lands one, move, feints. But O'Malley's moving with him. He's adjusting his legs. He's trying to put his shell in the right spot. It's a ground and pound search, but not like a finishing sequence. And Herb Dean just stopped it. I think it's just because O'Malley's leg was so obviously compromised that Herb Dean didn't see any path to victory for O'Malley, and he didn't want to see him take unnecessary damage, which, I mean, if that was like a title fight, a fight with absolute title implications, I would be a lot more upset. The most significant effect of that decision by Herb Dean was just Sean O'Malley losing his undefeated record. So for me, Marlon Vera's last 2 fights have fairly big asterisks on it. It's funny because now everyone talks about the O'Malley fight. Like, O'Malley won't admit he lost. He just calls it a fluke. He doesn't think much about it. He's whining, kind of, but like Marlon Vera was whining a lot about his last fight, so I find that kind of funny. Anyway, so I don't know what to say about Marlon Vera is what all this rambling is trying to set up. He's a guy who has been able to finish a lot of contenders more at the bottom, not contenders, but fighters at the bottom of the division. And against his two best opponents, Song Yadong and Sean O'Malley, I don't have a clear opinion on his performance. So that makes this opportunity against Jose Aldo really interesting. Jose Aldo, I don't know what you know about him, but he was the featherweight champion before the UFC and in the UFC for a very long time. One of the most impressive dominant reigns in mixed martial arts history. Lost his belt to McGregor, got it back against Frankie Edgar when McGregor refused to give him a rematch, then lost twice to Max Holloway. He looked like he might be done. He might be on the outs. And then he had two finishes against Jeremy Stevens and Renato Moicano, who were both streaking, surging, dangerous top 10, top 5 prospects looking for a title shot at that point, and said, no, I'm for real. And stoppage, like, it was a crazy vicious body shot to Stevens and a beautiful, I think it was a straight, I can't remember the Moicano finish, but not just like point decision wins, like hard, brutal striking. Then he lost to Alexander Volkanovski, who went on to beat Max Holloway and become the featherweight champion. Can't fault him there. Aldo moved down to bantamweight, had a very, very competitive fight with Marlon Moraes, which I thought he won, and so did the UFC because they gave him a title opportunity. First against Henry Cejudo. COVID forced Aldo to pull out, but he got a second title opportunity then against Petr Yan, which he ultimately lost. But it was a very competitive fight for 3 rounds, and Aldo looked better in the second round against Yan than he looked more complete against Yan than he had in many of his previous fights, throwing in the leg kicks. So I'm trying to say, is Jose Aldo only loses to top guys so far? Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, a very competitive fight with Marlon Moraes, who was just coming off an absolute streak. Moraes is also on the card, so I'll talk a bit about him later. But I love this matchmaking because you have Jose Aldo, a guy who looks like an absolute top 5 staple at the very least. He has finishing ability, brutal leg kicks, able to stop you with body shots, head movement, versus Marlon Vera, a guy I don't know how for real he is. In terms of style, Marlon Vera puts on a brutal pace, walking forward, feinting, throwing lots of leg kicks. He forces the clinch, tries to throw knees. It's almost a bit reckless watching the fight with Song Yadong. I thought he was going to hit Yadong in the groin like 10 times because the knees, the front kicks, the legs to the kicks to the thigh. But it's a very it's technical, but it's walk you forward with pressure. And I think Jose Aldo at his best circles out of that, lands brutal leg kicks, finds body shots, and finishes that type of fighter with ease unless there's some sort of adjustment Vera can make. So you never know with a fighter who's been in the cage as many times as Aldo when the decline is going to start. I don't think it has up to this point. You can't say after one fight, but it would take a very weak performance by Aldo for me to say Vera won because Aldo was declining and not because of the inherent strength of Vera's performance. But at the same time, I still have my asterisks on Vera, and I'm expecting the leg kicks, the body shots, the head shots of Aldo to be too much, as long as he can keep that pace for 3 rounds. But very exciting fight. Moving on down the card, the next fight is Michael Pereira versus Khaos Williams. They're both very interesting fighters. Khaos Williams, I think, has a combined octagon time in his 2 fights of maybe a minute, maybe a little more, certainly not more than a minute and a half, 2 stoppages. The last one was within the last month, I believe, and against a guy who was 6-1 with lots of finishes himself, Abdul Razak Alhassan. And what that let Khaos Williams do is steal the hype of a guy who was 6-1 in the UFC welterweight division. So that's how you start breaking into the top 15. Now, Michael Pereira is a very flashy, unorthodox, difficult to talk about fighter. He's a wild man. It's not just about winning for him, it's about putting on a show. One fight, he'll do shit like he'll try and do a flip over a guy's guard to find himself able to enter the mount. He throws like this, he tries to hypnotize you with his movement and throw wild flying knees. It's worked out for him a little, but not quite so well. He has 2 wins in the UFC. One of them is against a guy most recently with no wins in the UFC, and I always discount that. But what interests me is he's such a wild card variable fighter. Like, what is this Khaos Williams guy who has just found the knockout button real quick in both his fights? What's he going to make of that unorthodoxness? That he's not going to be able to predict it. So is he going to be able to read it and find a finish just as fast? Or is this kind of variability wild card going to just totally throw him off his game? And I have no idea what's going to happen. It could be an instant knockout. It could be a slugfest. It could be a bizarre finish. It could just be a lot of bizarreness and 2 big guys gassing. But it's certainly main card worthy, and I've certainly got my eye on it. Next on the card is Marlon Moraes versus Rob Font, and this is almost the discount version of the Jose Aldo Marlon Vera preview I just gave, because it's very similar. Marlon Moraes, I'd say both fighters have something the other fighter needs. Marlon Moraes had this beautiful streak to the top of bantamweight division where he was looking like an absolute murderer, top dog. I want to say it was 3 first-round finishes against Aljamain Sterling, Jimmy Rivera, and Rafael Assunção. Earned himself a title shot opportunity. Came out looking great against Henry Cejudo. Cejudo made the right reads, got the better of him. He then had that very close fight I mentioned against Jose Aldo, showed he's still a top-level guy, and then is coming off a loss to Cody Stamman, where Stamman just honestly outclassed him. So he's looking for a return to form, to that first-round finishing streak he showed earlier. Rob Font is a long stay in the bantamweight division, but he's been in the rankings, but he hasn't been able to crack the top. When he's gotten his shot at top guys, he's lost both times. So for Rob Font, this is an opportunity he's done this twice now. It's his 3rd chance. I don't know how many more he's going to get to make something click, make it work in his game, and figure out how to get the win against a top 5 guy and move your name up into that conversation. And it's a good opportunity against a guy like Marlon Moraes because the holes in his game have been kind of exposed. He comes out very hard in the first round. He has deadly, deadly power. You have to be careful of that. But if you can keep him extended, keep him swinging, you're going to find your opportunities in the 2nd and 3rd round. For Marlon Moraes, it's a return to form. It's a bit of a step down in competition. It's not Cory Sandhaggen, it's not Jose Aldo, it's not Henry Cejudo. So he's going to have an easier time finding that scary finishing power. But if he wants to keep his name relevant, that's what he needs. So it's not like win or be cut, but it's win or fade more into irrelevance. So that one's interesting. Then this next fight got my heart in it because it's got my favorite Canadian fighter at the moment, Gillian Robertson, going up against Talia Santos. I broke down Talia Santos a little, talking about her fight which got scrapped against Montana De La Rosa. And Gillian Robertson at the time had a fight booked against Andrea Lee. Lee, I think, withdrew due to injury. I assume it was De La Rosa who withdrew because Santos stayed on the card, and they both got pushed back into this fight. So they've both been in training camp, but only had about 2 weeks to prepare for each other. Gillian Robertson is my favorite Canadian fighter because she just finds a way. She's so game. She's an amazing grappler. I think she has the most finishes in the UFC Strawweight division, which is a division I have my eye on, as I've said in the past, because it's fascinating to watch the real-time alignment of it. And Gillian Robertson is one of those prospects driving up, trying to figure out how to get through the old guard and make her way to the top of the division, working on her game as she does so and constantly improving. And I've gotten to watch almost every one of her fights. Funny enough, when I tune in, she wins. The 2 times she's lost have been ones I haven't tuned in to watch. So maybe that's the trick, and I just have to make sure I watch this. But it's awesome. She's a jiu-jitsu fighter first, and a lot of jiu-jitsu fighters, the trouble is, how do I get this to the mat? And I genuinely don't know how she does it. She constantly looks outsized, like she's not going to have the strength advantage, but she just finds a way to make the takedown happen. You're afraid for her on the feet, but she stays defensive, she stays smart, and she makes the fight happen on the ground. And then once it's on the ground, it's her world, and she just progresses and finds a finish. I think it was against Courtney Casey. She had this hilarious one where it was 2 rounds of, like I said, bigger girl against her, but she just gets it to the ground, out grapples her. And she almost put the commentary not to sleep with her grappling, but they'd seen 2 rounds of it. They weren't really watching. And then like Robertson just kind of quietly like snuck onto the back and snuck a choke in, and like commentary didn't really even realize it happened, and they're just mid tangent, and then they're like, oh shit, the finish is coming. Robertson had her first win by decision since then, so maybe she's a little hungry. But Talia Santos is a really dangerous opponent for her because Santos has a strong striking base. She's found her confidence, I think, in the UFC. She's able to move forward. She's a Muay Thai fighter, so she's great in the clinch. So sometimes if you're a grappler, you just want to tie them up and look for a way to bring it to the ground. But if Robertson tries to do that, knees to the body, knees to the head, elbows are coming, and that could put her in serious danger. And Santos is no slouch on the ground either. She won her last fight against Molly McCann in large part due to her grappling. So if she gets on top of Robertson's going to be in trouble. I'm looking for Gillian to do what she's done, find a way to bring it to the ground against the bigger, scarier striker, and then from there, just her nickname is Savage, to continue her savagery, find a choke, find an armbar. I can't say I'm not biased. I absolutely want to see Gillian Robertson take this. I want to see the Canadian climb the ranks and get that much closer to the top. She's training 1-on-1 with Dean Thomas, one of the better coaches in mixed martial arts, or I should say 2-on-1. Jose Torres also trains with her. But I've got to think, having a great mind like that put all his time towards you is got to just... I think we're really going to see the results of that in her performances over the years, and I hope that starts today. I'm already on the Gillian Robertson hype train, but I'm looking to just sail past another station and keep on chewing. Last fight on the main card opener, Greg Hardy versus Marcin Tybura. Do you recognize that name?
Greg Hardy, yeah.
Yeah. Have you followed his UFC career at all?
Not particularly.
Well, it's been... you tune in to watch Greg Hardy lose, and I will continue to do that. But you tune in even more hoping Greg Hardy to get stopped, and to my chagrin, that has not yet happened. I guess there's 2 main patterns in his fight career in the UFC. He's either gotten a very quick finish which I think just attribute to his surprising athleticism that comes from having the background he does, or he's gassed and gotten into cardio problems, which have caused a governing body to step in. So the first time that happened was his UFC debut, threw an illegal knee to the head against a grounded opponent, because you could tell he was just tired, and I don't want to say took the easy way out, because that's not what fouling your opponent for a finish is, but it is kind of when the going got tough, he couldn't get tougher. He forgot the rules or disregarded the rules. Then that happened again where he was gassing, and at the end of the second round, and his corner gave him a fucking asthma inhaler. So it's been interesting to watch the UFC build Greg Hardy, because they've put him against like gradually steeper and steeper competition. His last win was against Maurice Green, who it was almost disappointingly quick finish, and I thought Green would have better striking defense than he did, but most of my hype on Green came from him taking longer to get submitted by Alexei Oleinik than I thought, so maybe I just overrated Green. I'm not overrating Marcin Tybura when I say he's Greg Hardy's second toughest challenge to date, the toughest being Alexander Volkov, his one real UFC loss, but no one expected him to beat Volkov. It was a last-minute replacement opportunity. So Marcin Tybura is a very good wrestler. He was sitting at the top of near the top of the division at one point. He had a main event opportunity against Fabricio Verdum, who was, I believe, the number 2 ranked fighter at the time. He didn't get it done. He had a co-main fight against Derek Lewis, where I thought he was beating Lewis. He was doing well, and then Lewis exhibited his amazing anti-grappling and just found a way to win by knockout, as he often does. Tybura went into a bit of a slump post that. I think he had a win against Struve, 2 losses by knockout. But since then, he's on a 3-fight decision streak. So that's the crossroads we have here. We have a guy who either is a good enough wrestler to get it to the ground, keep it on the ground, and win by decision typically, who's been knocked out many times on the feet, versus a guy who's trying to learn mixed martial arts on the fly, slowly making his way up the division, facing one of the challenges you need to face and overcome to make it to the top. That grindy, decision-y, good grappling wrestling style. So Greg Hardy usually finds a way to find the knockout, to my chagrin. I wish Tybura had a little more obvious finish in him. You never know. I mentioned Hardy's cardio. That wrestling style is a really great way to sap cardio. So if Tybura cannot get knocked out in the first 2 minutes of the fight, if he can show enough defensive awareness to not get caught off guard by Hardy's athleticism, I think this fight gets really interesting and favors Tybura the longer it goes on. He's just got to find 1 takedown, 2 takedowns, keep the chain wrestling going, and make Hardy tired, and then the fight swings in his favor. But I mean, Greg Hardy is the best example of a heel. You tune in to watch him lose, and this is a fight where he has a tried and true proven path to victory. But the good news for us who want to see Hardy get hurt in the octagon is if he wins against Tybura, he starts to get those top 15 opportunities against the real threats in the division. So that's the main card. The other fight I'll highlight is the prelim headliner between Anthony Pettis and Alex Morono. I just kind of want to highlight the absolute murderer's row Anthony Pettis has gone on throughout his career. I could pull up his Tapology or Wikipedia page and list it, but it is a long, long list. But he's finally taken a step down in competition, and it's going to be interesting to see what our assessment of him is after he's taken that step down. Some guys just always fight to the level of their opponents. Like, you can put them against a top 5 guy and they can get make it competitive and lose, and then you put them against like a guy 20-30 ranks down with far less of an impressive resume, and you almost see the same fight play out. So Pettis' career since losing the belt long ago has been more or less win one, lose one. He's coming off a win. I thought he lost against Cowboy Cerrone, but it's his first best opportunity to put 2 wins in a row, which is something he hasn't done in a very, very long time. It's a chance at resurgence. He had that chance once. He knocked out Stephen Thompson, and then he lost to Nate Diaz. Now he's gone. He's gotten a win against Cowboy. He's taken a step down. If he can get this win, get a couple more wins, maybe we see one last resurgence, or maybe we see this is the end of Showtime Pettis in the top 10 of the division. Alex Morono is a guy who's just been in the UFC a lot. He has mostly wins, but losses, most notably to Khaos Williams, who I previewed on this card. So I think you kind of know what you're getting in Alex Morono. Good striking, good grappling, standard test. If Pettis is still a top 15 fighter that he shows flashes of, he should be able to look good and look dominant. If his ship has sailed, if this is it for Pettis, I think we'll know on this fight. I'm not talking about retirement. I'm just talking about how excited you get, your hopes for the fighter. And the other thing I'll say about this card is the first 4 fights, those 8 fighters have a combined 3 UFC wins. So I will watch it, but it's not going to tell me a lot, because even if the fighters get wins, it's like, okay, now go get a win against a guy who has another win in the UFC. We're watching the UFC kind of rebuild the bottom right now, and a lot of these fight cards are just, the first 4 or 5 fights are going to be a bunch of guys who just won on the Contender Series facing guys who have won on the Contender Series, which deviates from the initial purpose of the Contender Series. But it's no longer the Contender Series. It's like the I can't think of the word. It's the bait, or what do you call it in an army when you have the people on the front line that you mow down?
The front line. I don't know.
Maybe I'll edit in the word. It's gonna kill me that I can't think of it. Shit, man, I really can't think of it. Anyway, a lot of Contender Series winners going against Contender Series winners. You know, iron sharpens iron. At the end of this process, you will have a much smaller number of people who have pulled out wins and build your contenders from there. But I like my UFC cards to have guys making their UFC debuts against guys with UFC wins in the past when possible. And we're not going to see that at the bottom of cards for a while, I think. Anyway, overall, I'm very, very excited for this main card. I'll be watching the prelims, and I'll recap it all next Monday. That's going to wrap up my combat corner for this week, though.